Let's go to Wellcamp. Are taxpayers aware that the total capital and leasing costs for this complex near Toowoomba will be $198.5 million? David Crisafulli, who gets that money?
If you add the on-costs on, Alan, it's more than that. It's over $220 million. And the first component of it, the $200 million you talk about, well, that goes to a private family company. Now, we've never had a beef with that. The beef has been with the silly government that was willing to sign a massive cheque for a facility we will never own. Now, the government said it was about future-proofing. What an absolute load of nonsense. How can something be future-proofing when you hand the keys back after 6 months and you can't use it again? That is absolutely ridiculous. Let me give you some figures to put home just how serious this is. Over $220 million. That could have put on about 2,500 nurses, could have bought over 190 ambulance vehicles, 130 intensive care beds in the middle of the greatest health crisis we've seen. Instead, we've got a lease facility that has had 700 people go through it. That's at a cost of about $300,000 each. They could have bought them their own unit, for goodness sake.
That's just unbelievable. I'm just listening to it. It's breathtaking. I mean, they keep saying, oh, well, if the state's pandemic responses change, it could be used and other uses will be considered during the lease. I understand the lease runs out next April. So when that happens, does the government surrender any kind of ownership, even though it's paid all this money to Wellcamp?
You hit it in one. The keys go back. And as for now, they said that they don't need it, so they're not using it for the next 6 months anyway. But you're right. Once the lease expires in April, it becomes a privately owned facility. This is the absurdity of it. And in the end, it's what happens when governments don't have an attention for detail and don't respect taxpayer-funded money. This was a really bad deal for taxpayers. And I can tell you, it struck a chord with people. I spent the weekend in my electorate going through to different things, netball carnivals, footy games, just talking to everyday people at the shops. They were coming up to me and just saying, I have voted for the Premier in the past. I never will again. It's all about how things look. She's checked out. It's about glitz and glamour. The things to me that everyday Queenslanders are feeling at the moment. They feel betrayed. They realise the jig is up. And people right now are shaking their heads at a time when cost of living is so very high and so very tough.
See, the other
thing, really bad deal, mate.
The other thing about this is, of course, this is taxpayers' money. I mean, didn't this government have to be dragged, kicking and screaming, to reveal these figures?
We were told for 12 months it was commercial in confidence. And we said that was an absolute load of nonsense. It's only commercial in confidence if you're protecting a competitive tender process, for goodness sake. There wasn't a competitive tender. It was just engaged with one business. Now, we pushed and pushed and pushed. Error of estimates, the acting Auditor General, and to her great credit, and then we watched them fall like a house of cards. Stephen Miles came in and said, well, we always intended to reveal this. We just needed to do it in estimates. It was an absolute furphy. They were dragged kicking, biting, because they didn't want the public to know the truth. You know why? They're embarrassed.
Yes.
It is a dreadful deal.
Well, just on the point that you just made then, are you saying that the Auditor General, the acting Auditor General, is now investigating the tender process? Was this an open tender?
It was not an open tender. It was engagement directly with one provider, and that's why it should never have been commercial in confidence. We've written to the Auditor General and we've asked for them to expand the scope. And I'll tell you why, Alan. I want to know who signed the deal, what advice they got, what due diligence they did, and I wanted to know why they're taxpayers, because I can tell you why. They knew full well the federal government was building a facility that would be owned and operated by taxpayers. They were continuing to pay for hotel rooms that remained empty. They paid $40 million from the day the Premier said hotel quarantine was over. They paid $40 million and only 12 people went through it, for goodness sake. They knew all along. And I intend to bring sunlight to this debate, I can tell you, and I am not going away on it, not for 1 second.